So now we're going to talk a little bit about self-management, and you'll see on here there's a conceptual model. It's actually a medical model. You'll see there's patient written right under that little man there. But if we think about this framework, we can also apply it to students. So defining goals, specifying actions for goal attainment, executing actions, evaluating, and then making recommendations. So it can definitely be a continuous formula there. Why self-management? Well, research says it works. In the behavioral field, counseling field, there's a lot of empirical research that says self-management works for modifying behavior over a sustained amount of time. Students, it becomes more responsible for intervention, so they take more ownership over their behavior over time. Of course, we don't always start off with self-management, but it certainly there's a lot of tier 2 interventions that leads to self-management. We turn over that control. It's easier to generalize and maintain. So if we think about adult behaviors like diet, exercise, self-care, they don't always start off with self-management. We may go see a dietitian or a counselor and then start to fade that to self-management. Think of Weight Watchers. It's all self-management, and they made a lot of money from that. The bridge between extrinsic control and self-control. So if we think about, especially with like check-in, check-out, we start with a lot of externalized reinforcers. So iPad time, free time. So we start with that initially, and then after they experience some success, it becomes intrinsically reinforcing. They really enjoy that feeling that they get when they're starting to meet their goals. Self-management can be added to the behavior education program or the check, connect, and expect, or as a standalone program. So having students track the number of times they blurt and then begin to develop goals to reduce the blurting. Definition of self-management: making a planned and continuing effort to cope with a task that has been difficult to master in the past. So here's a different kind of conceptual model: setting a goal, making a plan, getting to work, sticking with it, and reaching a goal. If we looked at that loop from the beginning, I think that would be more applicable to self-management because we're revisiting it based on data. And this is an ideal progression. And especially for students, if you make a graphical analysis of their progress over time, it's really cool to watch students. It starts to connect the dots a little bit for them, and they start seeing and feeling that they're having more success. What are the types of self-management? Problem solving, so recognizing that there's a problem that exists. If we identify that operationally, like when and where it exists, define the problem with precision, generate a list of solutions, and evaluate those solutions and choose one. And then you can begin to design and implement a solution. And after a week or so, evaluate how things are going. So we might do this a lot for ourselves with eating habits, sleeping habits, fitness, time management, spending habits. We always start with, what's the problem? Let's define it. Let's make a list of solutions, try some out, and see how it goes, and then revisit that if things aren't working out. We also have self-assessment, where we establish a performance goal and then define attributes of that performance goal. Then there's also self-monitoring, where we observe performance and monitor and record performance. So that's where the students would make their own observations and collect data to plot. And then self-evaluation, judging performance against a predetermined criteria. So this can be a yes or no. Did I meet my goal? Yes or no? Or a Likert scale, on 1 to 5, how did I do? Level of management. There's teacher controlled, where the feedback is with a predetermined goal. Teachers would pass the checklist from class to class, and they would record check marks for each period. Then there's teacher and student control, where the student carries the checklist from class to class, and student records check marks, and teacher reviews, adding his or her own assessment. A lot of the time when I'm fading from check in, check out, we would start with the general daily progress report, where the teacher fills it out and gives specific feedback to the student. But then after they've experienced a level of success over time, we want to start fading it out instead of dropping them cold from that intervention. So what we would also do is have them start to self-evaluate and talk about whether there's discrepancies between their rating and the teacher's rating. You could even consider giving bonus points for, when the student is really honest with their self-evaluations and gets scores themselves consistent with the teacher. Then finally, there's also the student controlled. So this is where the student records their own behavior and checks in periodically with an adult. So this is taking, instead of taking them out of the intervention cold, they would just fade it over time. So here's some samples that you can find in Blackboard with the site, with the PowerPoint. And we don't have homework per se for this, but just think about this, and we don't have to drop this in the discussion folder. But think about a self-management example for yourself, whether that's trying to increase your fitness levels, or your spending habits, your sleeping habits, maybe your diet. So start thinking of this in an adult way so that you can generalize it when you're working with students as well. That's all I have for you for self-management, and I'll see you on the boards.